think the problem lies in the black community, that it's got its roots in history, that for protection and for security, you don't talk your business to strangers. You don't talk your business out because you don't want the white man, you don't want the plantation owner to know how you're feeling, what's going on. Because either he's going to take advantage of you, he's going to break up your family, he may sexually abuse you, God knows what he's going to do to you. So you keep it inside. And your mother's going to tell you, and it's come down from generation to generation, your mother's going to say to you, you do not talk your business out. You keep it in. And so it becomes a bit of a catch-22. If you're dealing with stuff, and stuff is not the word I want to use, but if you're dealing with stuff and talking it out will help to relieve you, but you cannot talk about, you are forced not to talk about it, then what are you supposed to do? How do you break that cycle? And so for those of you in here who are seeing a therapist, congratulations again. And those of you who should be seeing a therapist, please hurry up and go. Next question. Anybody else? Oh, yes, sir.
How much then, I know within my own community, but how much within the African American community is that then compounded by the church when God should be able to handle their own problems?
Well, you heard the mother saying to the son in the reenactment, when the son telling her about being sexually abused, that he should get down on his knees and pray and ask for God's forgiveness. Very many cases of sexual abuse, it's the victim who is blamed. Now, can you conceivably imagine a 12-year-old boy who's sexually abused by an older adult being the one who encouraged the adult to abuse him? But that is often the case. And very often mothers and other family members are in denial about it. But we also know that in the black community, again for that protection, again for that security, let's take it to the Lord in prayer. What a friend we have in Jesus. Okay, how great thou art. Okay, and what do we do when we do that? We subsume and suppress our pain and try to hope that a white man coming out of the sky is going to help take it away. Yes, sir.
What I want to say was, when my mother passed, I went to see a psychiatrist. And we talked, and she was very helpful to me. And I was expressing this to one of the ministers in my church, and he was like, why are you going to see a psychiatrist? You just need to pray. And so I was speaking to another young lady who also went to counseling as well. And what her counselor said, which made so much sense to me, was that just like I need these glasses to see, your brain also needs a doctor. And if you're sick in your brain, or there's something wrong with your emotions or something, you go see a doctor. Just like when you go see a doctor when you got a cold or anything else wrong with you physically, your brain is a part of your body.
Your mind is
and your mind is a part of your body. And so you need to have someone to talk to, or whatever they are expert in that field.
But since you're taking me down that road, and I didn't want to go there right now, but we'll go. One of the problems we have is that we have our pastors have set themselves up as if they are the ones who can give that kind of counseling, and they don't have the training for it. And very often, they do more harm than good. So, yes, you may probably go and ask your pastor and say to your pastor, look, I got some stuff going on and I need somebody. Let the pastor, can you ask the pastor to, could you recommend someone that I can go and see? But here's the other side to that though. And I know that there are a couple of therapists. There's Tracy here, who's probably going to come up in a few minutes to join us in having a conversation with you. And there's James somewhere. Oh, there he is with a hat on. There's an issue that we need to look at, especially in the black community. It's called cultural competency. And that means, sir, as I'm saying, is if you go to see a therapist, and that's why I was really surprised when all of y'all raised your hands and said you were going to see a therapist. Does your therapist identify with who you are? And if you happen to be black, does your therapist understand what it means to be black? Especially if the therapist is a black therapist. Because there are some black therapists who still are stuck on a Western Freudian psychoanalytic model and have no concept of what it means to be black. So when you go to see a therapist who is a black person, he or she is going to say, well, have you thought about giving your life to Jesus? What does Jesus have to do inside a room there and then? Good. So you need to find a therapist who is black, who understands what it means to be black. If you happen to be gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender, you ask your therapist. You ask that therapist, how comfortable are you? How much do you understand LGBT issues? And if the therapist cannot give you an adequate and satisfactory response, just say thank you very much and get up and leave. Because I want to use the same analogy as Marvel was reminding me earlier tonight, that where I'm standing right now is part of the Bible Belt. It's the buckle, right? But let's use the parallel, the analogy of you going to church every single Sunday and you hearing a pastor coming down on you and telling you that you, because of who you are an abomination. Do you know what an abomination means? You are less than dog poop. Okay? You have no reason to be on the face of the earth. But yet you're going to go every Sunday and sit there and tithe and throw collection. Are you getting anything from that? Other than being told, or other than your identity, your sense of self being denied? It's the same thing with a therapist. Why would you sit down with a therapist who's going to tell you you need to give your life to Jesus, when that is not what you want? You want some psychological healing. And on Saturday, one of the things I'll be talking about is HIV and mental illness, which is a conversation we are not having. Because the virus itself is a very insidious, pernicious, and dangerous. And treatment alone is not just working. Did I answer your question in a kind of long, roundabout way?
Yes.
Good. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
The part where the mother who had lost her son who hung himself,
Yes.
and she made a statement about outside influences.
Yes.
To me, that sounded like a sense of denial of him actually being born gay. There's a lot of discussion as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. What is the percentage of people thinking that that's the influence of a person choosing their sexual orientation?
Thank you very much for that question, and that is what you call a segue kind of question. So with that question, now hold on a second. I can answer that question, all right? But I'm going to let somebody else who can probably answer it better than me, who's actually went to school for it, answer it. So I'd like to invite Tracy Skinner, who's a therapist here in Memphis here, to come down and join us. And while she puts down her little suitcase, I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hello, thank y'all for having me. I'm Tracy Skinner. I'm a licensed therapist. Hello. Can you repeat your question one more time, please?
Okay, as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, ancestral based, I have been in some therapeutic experiences where there was a belief that the experience having my perpetrator being female had something to do with my choice of sexual orientation. At this point in my journey, I don't believe that because I know a little bit more about who I am and why. But some people seems to think that that has some influence of a confusion because of some kind of block, damaged emotions, etc., etc.?
Well, I think when you go into a therapist's office, I mean, there's levels of, I won't say ignorance, but I mean, there's some research has changed, and there's levels of ignorance that you come across in therapists as well as any other profession when you go into a doctor's office. So I think at a certain point, you have to kind of look at what makes sense. I mean, as far as with your experience, that there's different levels of, I mean, when you go through trauma as a child, I mean, there's childhood sexual abuse is a lot more prevalent in the Black community than we talk about. I mean, it goes on, and there's many unreported cases of kids who have been abused, and in those cases, the perpetrator basically manipulates the child pretty much into internalizing the blame for the situation, because the perpetrator doesn't take responsibility for those situations. And when that happens at such an early age, it changes identity, and those kind of things are being formed developmentally at that age. So any level of trauma at that point has an effect, not necessarily as far as, it has different effects just on personality and development and all those kind of things. But to kind of look at one event and to give that as the root cause is kind of an ignorant statement.
Any other questions on sexual abuse? I just want to add one other thing. I just want to add one thing to that is, and I think Tracy's probably come back, I don't know if she will, but that's a whole other story. That it does not follow, it absolutely does not follow that the victim of sexual abuse is gay. And it does not follow either that the perpetrator is gay. Just like the cycle of domestic violence, there is an equal cycle of sexual abuse. It is possible that the perpetrator may have been the victim, and unfortunately what happens, and ladies and gentlemen, understand me, I'm a journalist. I've had to really and truly study and read what Tracy went to school for years. I had to do this in half an hour. What I've come to find out that research suggests is that when a child is sexually abused or suffers severe trauma, their entire neurology is altered, that they end up seeing life through that experience. So that is all they know. So just like in a domestic violence situation, if the child sees the father is beating the mother or the mother beating the father, which you don't hear too much about, the child then thinks that that is normal behavior. And when he gets into a relationship with a girl or another guy or somebody, he thinks that this is what he needs to do when the person steps out or perceives steps out of line. And so, similarly in sexual abuse, if the child has been sexually abused, he or she seems to think that this is now normal behavior and this is what I will do. And one of the things that there's a doctor in New York who I interviewed and who's written an essay for the book that this documentary is supposed to be coming out of, where she examines the whole construction of what is called neurogenesis or neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to regenerate and create new pathways. That means that if someone who was sexually abused goes into treatment, goes into therapy, that over time they could be changed, they could be changing their understanding of how life really is, not the life that they were seeing all the time. Does that help you, sir?
Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions? I saw somebody had their hand up at the back. Would like to take it down? Are you ashamed or embarrassed? Which one?
Neither of them. I was going to, I guess, ask you to expound upon that research being that, as a researcher myself, I know that we, being African diaspora descent, we run for research, okay? And those studies generally have 0.1, 0.2% of African American or black identified people. So if we're not counted in the numbers, how can you stand there and say that so forcefully when we've never been counted in the numbers, number one? And outside of the HIV epidemic, we don't exist in research. So can you expound upon those findings?
Well, that's not so much an expound as opposed to a challenge. In point of fact, let me, as again, I'm not a researcher, I'm a journalist. And so I set out to do this documentary and a book about depression in black gay men when I discovered that there was no material for the black gay community to refer to on their depression. We've got John Head in Atlanta who wrote a book about Standing in the Shadows about depression in black men. We've got Terry Williams who is hosting a screening of the documentary The Schomburg on the 18th. She wrote a book about mental illness in the black community and only spends a page and a half on mental illness or depression in black gay men. So there's really nothing about, you know, except academic articles or scholarly journals. And in point of fact, there exists research studies about black men, about black MSM. There's actually one study that just came out earlier this year that was done by somebody from Princeton that examined black MSM or black men who have sex with men and their relationship with the church. Okay? Now, unfortunately, one of the problems we do have in the black community is not that black people don't show up for studies, because there's always the lingering suspicion, as with the Tuskegee experiment. There's the suspicion and the distrust of medicine and so forth, because there's the conspiracy theories that this forms to keep people down and all that kind of, you know, language. But there's also many black people who do show up and do participate in studies. Unfortunately for the researchers, they do it just so they can get their dissertation or their PhDs, and then they move on. Yeah. The work, the results of those studies don't trickle back down into the community, unfortunately. But the research is out there. You just got to use Google Scholar sometimes, or LexisNexis, or one of the others, and you can find the relevant research that actually does examine issues in the black community and the black gay community. Yes, sir.
I want to know, were you saying that learned behavior is typical if a person was sexually abused? That the abuse becomes the abuse, or are you talking about learned behavior?
Yes, I'm suggesting that.
Okay, I was abused. I didn't abuse anyone.
That's fine. You might be an anomaly. You might be you may not, because of your experience, and I probably could refer this question to Tracy over here. Yeah, and she agrees.
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that. I mean, there's a lot of variables involved, and just because someone goes through an experience, a traumatic experience, and they're abused by a certain particular person, many people don't replicate that experience over again. But there are some people who are affected by that, and as your early sexual identity comes into place, as far as if a sexual experience is early in life, prior to kind of the age of puberty and the age that it's typically supposed to be, then there's it affects us in different ways, as far as whether we identify and have a connection with that person who that early experience is, no matter who they are. So there's some level of connection that we get from that early experience. So it's not as complicated as just because that it's always like that, but it's a factor sometimes. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much, Dr. Tracy. Yes, sir?
One more question. As you were preparing your documentary and going through with it, did you run across within the African American community influences from the ex-gay community in reparative therapy? As I I know in the past couple of years, it seems like no longer Exodus International, but their branch off, the group that's broken away from them, seems to be trying to make some inroads into the African American community and churches.
I could say to you, sir, if I could find the money, I'd probably do another documentary, even though I swore I would not. But I probably would, and that would be one of the issues I would examine. The issues that we dealt with here in this documentary were issues that came up as preeminent themes from the research and the interviews I had done for the book that I'm working on. So the documentary instead has now come before the book. And those were the preeminent themes: sexual abuse, sexual identity, actually sexual identity and sexuality, sexual abuse and trauma, and HIV diagnosis, the role of the church in a black gay man's life, and growing old as a black gay man. Those are the 5 themes, as well as bullying as a form of trauma. But the ex-gay movement is strong. The ex-gay factor needs reparative therapy. That's a whole area that needs more exploring. Transgender needs more exploring. The role of incarcerated, those who are incarcerated and then are returned to the community and then recidivist again, that needs to be examined. The role of those who are homeless or aging out of foster care, they need to be examined as well. So that's a whole other conversation. Anybody else? All right. Yes, sir. This is the final question.
What can we expect to see from you expect to see from you in the future?
Only God knows. Right now, I'm just trying to get through tonight. Thank you. I'd like to be able to just kind of like, James, would you want to stand up and let people just, see who you are? James Connolly. Okay, he's one of the therapists here who work with Marvel. And most importantly, I want to say thank you all very much for coming out and supporting this film. I want to say thanks to Marvel for inviting me to come all the way from New York. The Red Door Foundation. That is what is more important. And I want to say thanks to Tracy for coming up here at the last minute and just kind of like, helping me put some professionalism on this for me, Now, one question I have for all of you. All of y'all are asking me questions. Do I get a chance to ask a question? What do y'all think of the documentary? Let me ask y'all to clap. It's not about that.
Can I make a statement
Yes,
about
ma'am.
the documentary?
Yes, ma'am.
I know I'm outside the box, and I've been silent on purpose because I'm a white woman, so, but I'm an anomaly, okay, in that I believe my father was bi. I'm pretty sure my nephew was gay, and they both committed suicide. And I haven't, and I'm a lesbian. And unlike many, it was because of my church. My church saved me. I grew up in Mississippi during the 60s and 70s, and my bishop was actually stoned for walking with Martin Luther King. Wow. So, I'm an anomaly. I know that's not true, but I know it's not typical of Mississippi. But in deep South Mississippi, let me just say this. My church, many of the people around my church thought that we were all of the devil. And so, the thing was, back then, if you were gay or if you were mentally ill, you were possessed by some demon. And no one has really talked about that. So, that possession thing, that's real deep down here in the South, and that's a whole nother documentary in itself too. So, but thank you for having a Muslim man as one of the spiritual leaders in your film, because it shows that there are positive spiritual people in the world. They're not all you know,
Well, it was
chasers.
deliberate that I put the imam in this film, because the reason for the imam is because Christianity and Islam are the two predominant religions that demonize homosexuality.
Right.
And so since he is an openly out, proud, gay, black, Muslim priest, he's one of two in the world,
Wow.
okay? So if I could land him for my documentary, that's a coup.
Yeah.
And the second coup was that mother, okay? She and I are now very good friends, and it so happens that where she lived, where her son committed suicide, was in 2004, was just around the corner from where my family's house is, and nobody knew.
Wow.
And it turns out that when she used to go walking in a park, that my late mother and late sister used to go walking, and they never knew each other. Just around the corner from where each other lived. But what was important for me was getting her to talk about it as a black mother, as a black woman. Because what it says, for anyone who's thinking of committing suicide, this is what remains. This is the damage that it does to your family and to the people you leave behind. People blame and say that somebody who's committing suicide is selfish. They don't often understand that it's a combination of things. It's neurochemicals in your brain as well as external factors that contribute to make you feeling that way. And so, as Dr. Jeffrey Gardner was saying, part of the process is accepting yourself for who you are. We saw the older guy in the documentary look in the mirror. One of the questions I ask everybody is, when was the last time you looked at yourself in the mirror butt naked? I only see one hand up. What, you didn't hear that question? When was the last time you looked in the mirror and looked in the mirror and saw yourself butt naked? Look butt naked in the mirror. Yeah, but when you did, do you accept what you see? All of what you see. That's the question you have to ask yourself. Part of your acceptance is looking at yourself in the mirror and accepting yourself for who you are. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Time has been well spent. We do want to let you guys know about Saturday morning. He's referencing a class that he'll be teaching about mental health. We have some flyers for you. This is free. We want you to take advantage of this free education. I believe that I have brought some of the best people to Memphis for the best. I believe so much in my population and in this city that we reached long and far to bring some of the best people to try to move this city forward. I also want to acknowledge some of our other facilitators who have traveled here. The guy that answered the challenging question, that's Daniel Driffen from Atlanta, Georgia, who will be teaching Black Gay Leadership. I also saw in the room Father Joseph, who will participate in our spirituality panel discussion. He's Memphis' own, and also Joseph Mitchell, who will be in a spirituality panel discussion again. Do I have any other facilitators? Everybody that helped me plan this weekend, if you could stand or wave your hand, and thank you so much. Lastly, I want to say we need more volunteers for Saturday morning. So if you're willing to volunteer, get up early in the morning at 8 o'clock a.m., please meet me on the front row. And although you may not be able to get up at 8 o'clock, maybe we can do some rotating things. So just meet me on the front row. We need volunteers for Saturday morning. We also have tickets for tomorrow's event.